Welcome to Good Thinking Live. Welcome all of you good thinkers who join each week. Some of you are new. Welcome new people. Welcome new good thinkers. But all of you who join each week, and to those of you new who want to take a little bit of time to kind of jumpstart your week into better thinking by stealing just a little bit of time away from all the time we're spent being told what to think, so we can luxuriate and spend a little bit of time thinking about how we think to improve how we think. So welcome. Let us know who you are and where you're from, because one of the best things about being here on LinkedIn Live each Monday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, and streaming simultaneously on YouTube Live, Becki Saltzman, subscribe, hit that bell, is that we've got people from all over the world to give us not only different viewpoints, but also different perspectives on all the different ways that we grapple with how to think, primarily from critical thinking perspective and applied curiosity perspective, with the goal of being able to make better decisions. So that's what we do. So let us know who we are. Ray, first one on the show. Welcome, Ray. Thank you for being here. And I'm excited to have your input, because today we're going to be talking about and grappling with a very pesky brain bug, a very pesky bias. And, we kind of are now biases are in the news, but it's kind of like the mother of all biases. And it operates totally differently than all the other biases. It's a unique meta bias. All right. So let me say hi from Animesh from Pune, India. Welcome, Animesh, another regular good thinker to the show. Stephen, greetings from some granddaughter's home. She defected from Stalin's granddaughter's home. She defected from the Soviet Union in 1966. Abdrachid, welcome, another great thinker on the show, regular contributor. Thank you for all of your good thinking. Barkley, hi from Washington, D.C. So we've got people coming in from all over the country, in the United States, and all over the world. So welcome everyone to the show. All right, so let's get started. And if you are joining us live, definitely participate. We've got lots of rubber chickens to give out today. And if you're joining after the live show, continue to add your comments, because we all need a forum for being open to thinking and dissecting how we think. Yay, Jeffrey Webster, welcome from Pickering, Ontario, and Mohsen from Tehran, Iran. Welcome. All right, let's get started. Here's the first question. How many of you think that you are less biased than average? Not like, no one's going to say we have no biases, but how many of you think you are less biased than average? It is tempting for me to think that I'm less biased than average, because that's what we teach at Applied Curiosity Lab. We teach organizations, train organizations to identify biases in their decision making. So how could I be less biased than average? Aha, a hint. How many of you have this inclination? And the next question is, what makes you think this? What makes you think you're less biased or more biased than average? I'm going to say hi to LinkedIn Learning from Ottawa, Canada. And we've got Kapil from India. Welcome to the show. So let us know. We're going to do lots of participating today. We're going to be in and out 30 minutes, and we're going to deal and discuss the metavirus called the metavirus. Completely, what's on my mind, the meta bias that is referred to in the literature as Myside bias. Now, studies indicate that almost every cognitive bias is actually negatively correlated with intelligence. So, the more you do well on an intelligence test, the less biased you are. Now, one could grapple with whether these intelligence tests are biased in and of themselves, and that would be a very worthy critical thinking topic of discussion. But in this particular case, across most used intelligence tests and most ways to measure bias, there is this negative correlation. And these are found for some of the most well-studied biases, including the anchoring bias, framing biases, overconfidence bias, outcome bias, conjunction fallacies, base rate neglect, and many other biases. So a lot of these biases that you hear about and that we'll be talking about on Good Thinking, we talk about a lot of them each week. I mean, every week we talk about at least one. A lot of these biases are actually negatively correlated with these intelligence tests. There is another thing that they are kind of correlated with, negatively correlated with, that the more people score higher on tests of open-mindedness, to the extent that you can measure that, the less biased people tend to be. And that works in all kinds of ways. And in people working in the bias space, it is easy to think, like me, that we are less biased than others. But then what comes along is the pesky Myside bias. And we're going to get into that. Let me say hello to Ray, probably around average. Excellent. Statistically likely to be average. Me too. I would need other people to tell me because I can't spot my own biases. Brilliant. First rubber chicken of the day. Yay. And then, okay, let's see what we've got. Mostly thanks to your course, I often reevaluate my thinking to discover biases. Excellent. Thank you. Rubber chicken. Abdrachid is referring to some of our critical thinking courses that we have, Applied Curiosity, that I have on LinkedIn Learning. So we have several decision-making courses. We have critical thinking for better judgment decision-making, developing a critical thinking mindset, improving your communication with critical thinking communication. I can't remember the title, sorry. Critical thinking for more effective communication. So some of these are courses on LinkedIn Learning that are designed to kind of hone our thinking skills. And it's fun. I can never get enough of creating these courses and taking them myself. All right. Hi, Carol from Canada. Welcome, Carol. All right. We're going to get into Myside bias, because this cognitive bias doesn't seem to be correlated with intelligence at all. And that makes it unique among the biases. The smartest and most educated people are just as susceptible to this bias as less educated folks. This bias is Myside bias. Myside bias is the cognitive bias that causes us to actually process information in ways that favor our own beliefs, opinions, and attitudes. Myside bias reflects a deficiency in critical thinking. It reflects a deficiency kind of in our judgment mechanism, because this is our, you use a measuring tape to measure distance. This is the measuring implement that we use to judge. And so this Myside bias reflects a deficiency in critical thinking, but not necessarily a deficiency in intelligence, which is kind of weird, because it's hard when we spend a lot of time trying to hone our intelligence and understand these things, and we fail to neglect that there is this pesky bias hanging out here that isn't controlled by how much we work on our intelligence or understanding biases, until you actually hone your focus on Myside bias and put some things in place, which is what we're going to go over today, to be able to address that. All right. So we've got So Animesh says, critical thinking course of yours is just too good. Thank you. Which one is it? Is it I think we have 3 critical thinking courses on the platform now. So maybe that's for better judgment decision-making, for more effective communication, or the mindset course. We've got that trifecta of critical thinking courses. Brian, welcome from Dubai. Yes, United Arab Emirates. Fabulous. Welcome, welcome. All right. Myside bias is one of the most common and ever-present biases, because it is exhibited by the vast majority of subjects studied. It's like the ever-present bias of all biases. And, many of you might know confirmation bias. How many of you kind of know confirmation bias, and you know that it's out there, and you work to kind of counteract it by finding things to disconfirm what you believe to be true? How many of you are very familiar with confirmation bias? Just say, familiar with confirmation bias, not familiar with confirmation bias. All right. Maybe some of you are, some of you aren't. Sometimes I forget myself, and I have to recalibrate and remember confirmation bias is out there. But confirmation bias is the bias that makes us seek evidence that supports our previously believed kind of beliefs and opinions, and discount evidence that doesn't. Let me tell you how Myside bias is slightly different. Myside bias isn't actively kind of ignoring evidence, leaving out evidence that disconfirms what we believe. Myside bias is actually processing information that we believe in a different way. That's what's so weird. That's what's so pervasive. So we're going to say hi from Pakistan. Hi, Safe. Welcome from Pakistan. Ha. Okay. Mosen, dear Becki, please wish success to our company called Payton. We're a new startup. Wish success. You got it. Good morning from sunny Arizona, Terry. Welcome, Arizona. It's kind of sunny here in Portland today, too. All right. So Abdracha said familiar with confirmation bias. Perfect. Many of you might be. You hear it all about in the news, but confirmation bias is slightly different. So I want to make sure that we get this distinction. Myside bias isn't predictable from any standard measure of cognitive or behavioral functioning, and the degree that people show Myside bias is not correlated with any level of intelligence or any kind of active open-minded, like measures of active open-mindedness. It's not correlated with how we display other biases. It creates this, Myside bias creates this true blind spot among some of the most highly educated and cognitive elite. And that's what makes it so interesting, because you see it in the highest levels of academia and politics and whatever. And we don't think we have it because we think that we can educate our way out of it. And the only way to educate our way out of it is to understand how it exists and believe that it exists and understand that it exists as pervasive as it is, and question. But we're going to get into how to kind of little tricks for overcoming it. I'm going to say hi to Jeffrey. The ubiquity of Myside bias is implicit in the political polarization that plagues our existence as a species, regardless of our perceived intelligence. That deserves a rubber chicken. It's actually, that's very prescient, because a lot of people think that the polarization is due to maybe confirmation bias, or a lot of people think that polarization is due to the post-truth society. So how many of you think we're living in a post-truth society? Like, we're living in a society that has abandoned the concept of truth. How many of you think that we are living in a society that has abandoned the concept of truth? I mean, you read about this all the time. We live in this post-truth society. How many of you agree with that? I'm going to give you a hint. I don't agree with it. And the reason I don't agree with it is because of the pervasiveness of Myside bias. And it makes it so that we are processing. We are not neglecting the truth. We're really, our brains are processing the truth in an increasingly Myside bias way for very specific reasons. Now, social media and some of these other things are definitely exacerbating the problem, but there are some other things that might be a little controversial for you to challenge, because it's easy to think, yeah, that's because I've been trained in biases and bias training and implicit bias and a lot of that work, and you haven't been. So you don't understand. You have Myside bias. I don't. Turns out not so much. Okay, so we've got confirmation bias affects the reliability, absolutely. And reliability is one of the RRV, reliability, relevance, and validity, is the key to critical thinking and assessing the quality of information so that you know what to do. So Myside bias does affect it, and confirmation bias, and they're all tied in. But this Myside bias is weird because it kind of lives outside of these other things. And we've got Kapil, I would say a lot of us across the world, absolutely. Okay, so our problem is not that we're unable to value and respect truths and facts. That's not, I mean, maybe, but I would contend that maybe we're unable to agree on commonly accepted truths of facts because we believe that our side knows the truth, and that the post-truth is more about the other side. And the inevitable result of that is political and other kinds of identity polarization. Okay, so research has shown, let me tell you some of the areas where Myside bias has showed up. It's kind of mind-boggling. And remember, I have to remember, this isn't referring to other people. This is literally referring to me. Biases are so much more fun to spot in other people. How many people think it's more fun to spot biases in other people? And you see it all the time, but then you think, well, I'm not biased because I'm learning about this stuff. How many of you will admit to that? I'll admit to that a little bit. I have that too. Definitely. All right. This is where Myside bias shows up. And I'll go through where Myside bias shows up so we leave enough time for techniques to start to unravel it and to start to overcome Myside bias. All right. Okay. So Ray says, I can't wait to hear more about this truth angle. All right, we're going to get to it. So here's the deal. So people in many, many studies, and these are replicated studies. This is the one study that I'm bringing up. People will look at a virtuous act. Maybe they watch a video or they read about some virtuous act, but they don't know who's committing it. They don't know exactly what the profile is of the person committing this act. And then they learn that the person committing this act is like them in some self-identified group, or they learn that this person who committed the same act is not like them. Well, people significantly evaluate a positive act performed in their group more positively, and then if it's committed, the same exact act is committed by someone that they now learn, same person, same whatever, now learn is like not like them in some way that they hold that relates to their convictions. And if they see a negative act being performed, people will literally process that negative act in a completely different way if they think that that exact same negative act by the exact same descriptor is performed by someone in group versus outside group. So my side versus their side, same act. And this is a processing. So being aware that we do this is hard because we think, no, we don't do this. This is our brain at work. Maybe it's our evolutionary benefit, like to be this, this cognitive machine so that we protect our own tribe at all costs. Maybe there's some value to that evolutionarily. I don't know, but it is definitely there. All right. The next one is people will evaluate the identical experiment more favorably if the results support their prior beliefs than if the results contradict their prior beliefs, or they'll kind of try to make it fit. So they will say that experiment they'll scrutinize the experiment. Oh, that experiment didn't have, a proper representative sample size or something like that. Whereas if it does support their beliefs, there'll be a lot less scrutinizing. When searching for information, people select information sources that are likely to support their own position. That's more confirmation bias, right? Where we go to the same sources because we know that those are the reliable sources. The other sources are the liars. My sources are the truth tellers, and that's more confirmation bias. Judgments of logical validity. So logical validity are skewed by people's prior beliefs. So, for example, if you hear a bunch of evidence and then you see, therefore, marijuana should be legal, it is easier to judge correctly that the evidence supported that valid conclusion if you believe that the valid conclusion is right versus if you believe it's wrong, regardless of whether the premises support that valid conclusion. That is kind of critical thinking. All right. So let me get into, let's say so we say, we tend to be more tolerant with people holding common aspects. Absolutely, we tend to be more tolerant. We tend to be more tolerant because we literally process the information from my side tribe in a different way than we process the information that comes from other side. Okay. Mustafa, you are one of my favorite instructors on LinkedIn. Thank you. Greetings to you. Thank you very much. Greetings from the United States to you in Egypt. Fantastic. I love it. And we've got Kapil. Let's see. What do we say here? Kapil. Prior judgments generally do more damage. Yeah, we'll get into that. That's a really good point. It isn't possible for us not to evaluate and just see things as they are. Absolutely, that we need to cut ourselves some slack. We're humans. We're brilliant and beautiful creatures, but we have our limitations, and it's good to be aware of them. That's why it's fun to be here each week. Okay. The next thing is Myside bias appears for emotionally significant issues and established beliefs. For example, and this is one really emotional in this country. Many of you are outside this country. I'll be curious what you think about our gun control conversations, because when reading about gun control, people usually prefer sources that affirm their existing attitudes. And they also tend to interpret ambiguous evidence as supporting their existing position, even if it's not. So the same ambiguous information I would use to support my position and think that it completely disconfirms another position. And it's hard to prove that Myside bias is a thinking error because it's hard to know when we're wrong. Now, how do you feel when you're wrong? When you think about some time that you've been wrong, I don't know if you can think about it. You can think about it mentally, like you can keep it here. But then with good thinking, sometimes you have to take that thinking here and feel it in your body. So you find out that you were wrong. And you start going, well, am I really wrong? Maybe I'm not wrong. You try to justify. Well, I couldn't have known it. You start to justify. I couldn't have known that. No, they're wrong. I'm right. But then it starts seeping in. What if I'm wrong? How does that feel? Where do you feel in your body that you're wrong? Because it's really hard for us to know what stuff that we absolutely know that isn't so. Like Mark Twain's quote, it ain't so much the things that people don't know that makes trouble in this world as it is the things that people know that ain't so. I love that quote. So it's rational to use our prior beliefs when we evaluate new evidence. And it's even rational for scientists to do this. They have the evidence that they use to form a hypothesis, and then they go test the hypothesis. We have to use prior knowledge. You know, as Animesh says, like we have to do this as humans. So for lovers of critical thinking, you know that the degree of reliability is something that has to be assessed. So a key part of reliability is assessing the credibility of the source of information or new data. So it's perfectly reasonable to use prior knowledge on something that you're judging in order to evaluate the credibility of new information presented. It's rational, as long as, who can say when it's not rational, as long as our prior beliefs represent real knowledge and not just unsupported desire for something to be true. So how do we know if our previous knowledge is really flimsy or it's solid? Well, one of the things to look out for is the word conviction. How many of you think that having conviction is a net positive or a net negative? I have conviction. It's a net positive or a net negative. When you think of conviction, it's not usually thought of as a negative, is it? Anyway, what do you think? Conviction, net positive or net negative? Okay. The word conviction better conveys the fact that our beliefs are often accompanied by emotional commitment and ego. And they can sometimes come from values or partisan stances. The problematic kinds of Myside bias derive from people projecting convictions rather than testable beliefs onto new evidence that they receive. So if your evidence is supported by conviction because you've tied it to your identity, you've tied it to your team, and we're all about right now, what is my identity? But if you tie your beliefs and convictions too tightly to your identity, you can't shake them off. They become part of you. And that makes you more susceptible to Myside bias. So all of this identity stuff, which you could say, well, I don't like that, we're talking about this, identity is important. But the dangerous downside is when you attach your identity too tightly to beliefs and they become convictions that are unshakable. Like you have to destroy yourself to challenge beliefs. That's when you know that you may be very susceptible to Myside bias. And it's also how you could look out and see that we live in a post-truth society because you're the only one. Your team is the only one that is in possession of the truth. So that's your hint. So Ray says a good question. So is in-group favoritism a subset of Myside bias? 100% yes. It is. Myside bias becomes a descriptor for the processing that takes place in group favoritism. And so Abdurrahman said, instead of prior knowledge, can we use RRV? And I'm going to say those two comments, both Ray's and Abdurrahman's, are rubber chickens worthy. RRV is how you can test information using reliability, relevance, and validity. RRV. Okay? Is it consistent? Can you trust the source? Is it relevant? Is it pertinent? And is it valid? Is it accurate? All right. Jeffrey Webster says, one could argue that human beings are post-truth species. Propaganda and disinformation are the hallmarks of our collective existence. Religious convictions and national mythology, inter alia, have served as drivers of disunity and unity. Yes. And now that we have access and we are supposed to draw lines in the sand and join teams publicly on social media, it does create this kind of conviction stew that makes convictions a lot more sticky. And that makes it difficult to address the things that we're going to get into in the last 4 minutes of this, which is to be able to challenge our avoid Myside bias. All right, so let's get into it. Okay, so the number one thing is understand that there's evidence that our ideological positions may correlate with brain differences. What? Do we choose our ideological differences or do they choose us? What do you think? Do we choose our ideological differences or do they choose us? The science isn't clear on this, but there's some interesting evidence that suggests that there are neurochemical differences in these ideological differences, and these differences in personality, for example, between liberals or conservatives, appear very early in life. So the convictions that are driving your Myside bias are in part caused potentially by your biological makeup. And that may mean that you didn't arrive at these things with as much conscious effort as you think. Aha, Jonathan Haidt stuff, right. Moral foundation theory, one of the theories. Yes, definitely. And there's some criticism about moral foundation theory. So again, yes, very much inspired by Jonathan Haidt. Entire chemistry is based on confirmatory test, yet serendipity happens absolutely. Excellent, excellent points. Okay, number 2. Distance yourself from your convictions. How do you do this? How do you distance yourself from convictions? Isn't it good to hold your convictions tightly? Well, think of your convictions like memes. So memes are like elements of culture that are passed from one person to the next by non-genetic means, like imitation. So, what are the memes of the day? What are the popular memes of the day? What are some things that we're all doing that are very popular in culture? You might be like, maybe one of the memes is, and this is not a genetically passed down thing, obviously, but maybe one of the memes is putting in your pronouns. Nothing wrong with that. That's a meme that has reasons to be helpful. But how do you acquire that meme? Is that your choice, or are some of these memes just kind of designed to be processed by you because of your Myside bias? So memes want to replicate. That's the whole point of a meme. They're good for whether they're good for us or not. They don't care how they get into your brain. They might get into your brain through conscious thought, but they might simply unconsciously fit into your innate psychological dispositions. So most of us are told the old folk psychology belief. I must have thought my way to my own conviction because they mean so much to me. All right. But when you think of convictions more like memes, like maybe they came to me without me choosing so much, then you can be a little less precious about your convictions. All right. So Hussein says, the saying that if you are not with me, you are against me, Myside bias actually leads to misguidance if he follows that saying. The association of intelligence with constructive critical thinking, which aims to improve development or correction path, the thing we are looking for. Yes, 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 yes. little challenges to our conviction, even though we're supposed to value our convictions. Where did our convictions come from? Did they come from our parents, our upbringing? How old were we when we got those convictions? And can we consider that the convictions might have happened to us in a way that wasn't so consciously chosen? That's weird. Oh my goodness. Number 3, avoid tying your beliefs to your identity. And it's super hard to do. Right now, we are all supposed to put our identities front and center, but there is a danger of amplifying Myside bias. It's just the truth. It might not be good. If you believe that the identity should be tied to everything that you do and everything you believe, that may kind of be a problem, because you might think, but that may be Myside bias rearing its pesky head. By encouraging people to view every issue through an identity lens, it creates a tendency to turn beliefs about testable propositions into full-blown convictions that are then projected as new evidence, and it's projected onto new evidence. So although our identity is central to our narrative about ourselves, and many of our convictions will be centered around our identity, that doesn't mean that every issue that we encounter is relevant to our identities. Avoid treating your beliefs as possessions that you have thought your way toward acquiring. Again, related to that conviction. Just know that maybe some of these beliefs clung to you, or you were pulled to those beliefs, or the beliefs were pulled to you like a magnet. All right? And avoid assuming your beliefs are necessarily getting you closer to the truth. So anything that makes you more skeptical about your beliefs will tend to decrease Myside bias, or at least the Myside bias that you display, by preventing beliefs from turning into convictions. Even though it feels so good to turn our beliefs into convictions, is a really comfortable thing. But if you really want to challenge your Myside bias, you've got to deal with a little discomfort. NLP, and I'm not sure you're talking about neuro-linguistic programming, tells us that with intervention, neural pathways can be changed, which is like letting go of existing convictions. Excellent. It'll be interesting. NLP, I've tried to kind of read the research and understand how much of it's real and how much of it's a placebo. That would be an interesting topic. I've got a couple of friends that are world-class NLP experts. Would that be interesting to have them interviewed on the show? Maybe. All right. So let's wrap it up, because the tendency to judge a statement according to how conveniently it fits into one settled position, Myside bias, it's pervasive among the entire world's political groups. Inquiry for good thinking, inquiry must come before advocacy. The antidote to Myside bias is to recognize that beliefs have their own interests, and for each of us to use this insight to put a little distance between ourselves and our beliefs. The fewer of our beliefs that are convictions, the less Myside bias we're likely to display. Now, none of us can be taught to luxuriate in the safety of perspectives not to luxuriate in the safety of perspectives we've long held. It's easy to luxuriate in those perspectives. Those are our perspectives, and our perspectives are the truth. It's something we all naturally do, but instead we need to be taught that in the long run, Myside processing will never lead to a deep understanding of the world that we live in. So, thank you. We went 33 minutes, so 3 minutes after. I hope that you got something out of this. Let me know what you're thinking. I hope you join us each week. Most Mondays, we're right here, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, on LinkedIn Live and on YouTube Live. So thank you to the regular good thinkers. Welcome to the new good thinkers. We need to give ourselves just a wee bit of time each week to steal time away from what to think, so we can focus on thinking about our thinking to improve how we think. So thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. Hope to see you next week. Thanks.